Good morning, good evening, whatever time of day it is for you. Welcome to this thing that I do called Thor's Entertainment. I am Thor, and I am continuing my playthrough of Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. Previously, I knocked out part 1 of that playthrough, defeating the bosses Melchiah, and also completing the first fight against Kain. If you are skipping part 1 and are just now tuning into the playthrough, this is all basically the revenge story of the vampire Raziel. Well, not vampire anymore. Now he is a soul-devouring wraith. So after Raziel was murdered by his master and all of his fellow lieutenants just kind of let it happen, or actively participated, Raziel has since been resurrected and has been pretty successful on his revenge path. And with one of his fellow lieutenants or brothers down, it's time to continue on that path. Next up on that list is going to be Raziel's brother Zephon. The elder god who resurrected Raziel told him that would be the next one to go after, so let's go ahead and jump into the game and make that happen. And I went ahead and saved and reloaded the game, so we're back in the underworld. I'll go ahead and stand on the platform and listen to what the elder god has to say. It's basically the same as what he said outside the sanctuary of the clans, but just a little bit different.
Seek out Zephon's lair, Raziel. Beyond the ruins that greet your exit from the underworld. Armed with the Soul Reaver, you may gain entry where your path was previously blocked.
So yeah, that was basically the same dialogue that we got outside the sanctuary of the clans, just minus the detail about it being within a cathedral. That's where we're going to find Zephon, and omitting the detail that they basically killed off all the human worshippers of that cathedral. So yeah, we are going to be going after Zephon next. And there's not really a warp gate right in that area, so I'm going to have to go ahead and go on foot through the underworld. Actually, I take that back. There is a warp gate right by the cathedral, but we have not activated that yet, so we're having to go on foot. And I'm going to be passing through the tutorial areas that we had to complete at the very beginning of the game. Fortunately, we will not have to deal with the cutscenes and any of that stuff, so even though it takes me a moment to get out of the underworld, it is not going to take nearly as long as it did the first time around. So I can just fly through everything without the Elder God interrupting me over and over again. But eventually we need to reach that point where we first escaped the underworld, and where we first shifted back into the material realm. And so far, things are going pretty well. I have not embarrassingly screwed up anything in the tutorial area that would have slowed me down, so basically the only thing I have left to do is to escape the Sluagh pit, and then I'm pretty much done with the underworld. I mentioned at the very beginning of this playthrough, whenever I shifted into the material world for the first time, that the gate in the background was going to be important. And well, that time has come. Whenever I get out of the underworld this time around, I do not bother shifting back into the material realm. I go straight over to the gate, and I use the ability that we got from Melchiah to give Raziel the impermeability necessary to pass through the gate, which I can only do in the spectral realm, which is why I did not shift back into the material world. After that, though, I run along this moat, and I find myself a rift to get back into the material world. The moat is guarding a gigantic building that we need to enter in order to go after Zephon. On the other side is going to be the Silenced Cathedral. Now, in order to open up the gate to the Silenced Cathedral that we just saw, I do need the Soul Reaver. It kind of acts like a key and can open up that door for us. So even though we technically could have passed through that gate a little bit sooner before our first fight with Kain, we would not have been able to fully access the Silenced Cathedral until we fought him. So advancing beyond that point did require us to fight Kain and also defeat Melchiah. Oh, and this is why I did not kill any of the humans back in the necropolis. If you do not do that and you just strictly kill the vampires, the humans will begin to worship you, and we're seeing that for the first time here. Although there are still some humans that will try to kill you regardless, and we will see some of those within the Silenced Cathedral. And while I am in this area, I'm going to go ahead and activate the warp gate, that way I can return here if necessary a little bit faster next time. Now that I have that knocked out, it is time to go ahead and infiltrate the cathedral grounds. So I'm going to backtrack to the moat and get back on that bridge and go to the locked door. Also, we make sure to say hello to the humans before we're completely out of the area. And yeah, once we get back over to the door that we need to unlock, Raziel can use the Soul Reaver, it opens it up. However, it's not going to be a clear path all the way into the cathedral. Once the door opens up, we do see that there is still going to be a barred gate, so I need to go back into the spectral realm and pass through, similar to what I did initially, just to get over into this area in general. And whenever I do pass through the barred gate, immediately to the right is going to be a rift that we can use to get back into the material realm. And that is when we notice something interesting. The Cathedral is going to introduce us to the next unique vampires. Melchiah's vampires were just decomposing ghouls, but over here where Zephon took over the Cathedral, the vampires are going to be very bug-like. They mostly seem to take inspiration from spiders, so now we have spider vampires. Now, compared to every other boss zone in the game, I think the Silenced Cathedral is the largest area. It also has the most puzzles between you and the boss. That is why you may not see me fighting and killing many of these spider vampires. I am just going to be trying to fly through the puzzles and reach the boss as fast as I can, which is still going to take a while. But yeah, otherwise I could be here a really long time. Alright, that cinematic kind of gave us an idea of the scale of the grounds around us. It also gave us an indication of where we need to go. So Raziel needs to start climbing these towers and finding a way to the overlook, or balcony, whatever you want to call it. Now you can scale this entire area in the material realm, although I do feel like some of the jumps are a little bit easier in the spectral realm. And despite this being a really open area with a lot of points you can potentially glide to, there's not really too much going on in the grounds. Like, the only thing really here to do is traverse this area just so you can reach the Silenced Cathedral's interior. Even when I was going over how to find all the optional items in other videos, there really wasn't any reason to glide or explore this area too much. Which is unfortunate. It is just kind of a barren spot, which I do think is kind of odd considering just how large the area is. But instead we just kind of passed through and now we are inside the cathedral, seeing these spider vampires going ahead and wrapping up their victims in their webs. I do not bother trying to fight the one we first see, and I leave him to go ahead and enjoy his meal. And then immediately beyond him and through the next set of doors is going to be a big ventilation room.
Once a testament to mankind's defiance of Kain's empire, this towering cathedral now stood derelict. The humans who worshipped here, dead for centuries. Its architects conceived this tower as a holy weapon against the vampire menace, a colossal instrument of brass and stone. The cathedral's pipes, once tuned to blast a deadly hymn, now stood silent, and these vacant spaces whistled their impotence.
And I am going to make immediate use of the pipes that Raziel was referencing by shifting to the spectral realm. That causes them to twist into a different form, and that means I can use them as a walkway, or at least I can use one of them as a walkway. And I end up taking my time walking up this thing, occasionally crouching and crawling on the ground because I don't want to fall off and start all over again. But I do make my way up onto the catwalk and shift back into the material realm. Now I'm going to run into one door almost immediately as I'm circling around, but I'm going to skip that first door because, well, there's no reason to go in there right now. We actually need to continue on to the second door. And beyond that second door, we are going to find something that's going to be a staple of the Silenced Cathedral. It becomes more clear after I shift into the spectral realm and then pass through the bars, but beyond those bars is going to be a room with a block puzzle where we need to push the blocks into the wall to complete some murals. These mural puzzles are kind of all over the place inside the cathedral. Well, I say all over the place, but I think there's like 4 of them and one of them is optional. Regardless though, this is one of the things you'll spend the most amount of time on within the cathedral trying to reach Zephon. So it kind of feels like there are more than there actually are. Okay, inside this room there are going to be 3 spider vampires, and at first I try my best to just try and avoid them while dragging around the blocks. And it starts off pretty good. They kind of just ignore me as I'm shoving around the first couple of blocks. But I do need to flip those blocks around quite a bit to get the pictures aligned just right, and eventually those spider vampires do take an interest in me. Once they start taking an interest in Raziel, I do use the Force Glyph, and that knocks them into a stun state, or at least most of them. It leaves the big spider vampire still active though, and whenever I try to go up to it and fight it, I accidentally go into the execution animation, and I inadvertently try using the Soul Reaver to destroy it, but, well, it just kind of smacks me and depletes my health, which means no more Soul Reaver. And there are no other weapons in this room, so I kind of had to readjust my tactic, and whenever I was able to slash it into another stun state, I flipped a block on top of it and crushed it, which will kill the spider vampires. And you'd be surprised how often that happens just moving around the blocks and trying to complete the puzzles, even whenever you are just ignoring the spiders. And it's around this time I began to wonder to myself, wait a minute, weren't there 3 spider vampires? Because I only saw the small one and I had just killed the big one. Keep that in mind because I ended up making the situation much harder on myself than I should have. Because in my mind, I was like, okay, I no longer have the Soul Reaver unless I fully heal, and I can't fully heal unless I go back to the Spectral Realm. And that kind of feels like a waste of time, so I'm not doing that. But since there are no other weapons in this room, there's no way for me to execute the spider vampires to get them to leave me alone for a longer period of time. Which on that note, even if you do kill the spider vampires, they do eventually respawn, so you don't want to waste too much time in this room. So yeah, I thought I could not kill the spider vampire. So I just do my best to ignore it and shove around the blocks, and just hope that it continues to leave me alone, or it continues to miss with its attacks to the point to where I'm not being bothered by it. And that works surprisingly well at first. It just continually missed its attacks whenever it tried to slash at me or bite at me. And even when this lone spider vampire did manage to make some contact with me and hurt me in some way, it would only slow me down for a brief period of time, and then I would just continue making progress with the block, so it really wasn't slowing me down all that much. Like, if you were just kind of listening to this and occasionally glancing at the screen or something like that, right after I push in this block wherever it goes into the hole in the wall, at that point I want you to pay attention because that's when it gets kind of funny just how much this spider vampire misses with every single attack it throws at me. So yeah, once that block is pushed into the wall, I go ahead and grab another and I start dragging it all the way across the room. And in doing so, the spider vampire tries to attack me every step of the way, and I don't think it hits me a single time. So even though it's persistent, it's not exactly doing the best job getting in my way. So even though I was making this a little bit more difficult on myself, everything was going pretty well. And I guess I'll go ahead and explain what I mean by I was making this more difficult on myself. Whenever I said I thought there was no way to kill the spider vampire because there are no weapons, and I did not want to shift back into the spectral realm and replenish my health to get the Soul Reaver back, it turns out there was actually a third option the entire time and I did not realize it. The torches in the corner of the room also have some spikes on them that you can throw stunned vampires onto and it will stake them and kill them. And whenever I was wondering what happened to the third vampire earlier, well, that was actually exactly what occurred. The force glyph had knocked it onto one of those spikes and killed it. I just didn't realize it. So yeah, all this additional dodging and running away from the vampires was completely unnecessary, and it does not take me a crazy amount of time to solve this puzzle. But it definitely takes longer than it should have, especially had I just went ahead and executed the vampires so they would not be in my way. And right around here, all the effort the spider vampire was putting in finally paid off, and he does manage to knock Raziel back into the spectral realm after depleting all of his health in the material world. So I go ahead and heal back up and shift back into the material world, only to find out that I have wasted a little bit too much time, and the big spider vampire has respawned. Seeing that, I go ahead and I try to use the force glyph on both of them to try and kill them really quickly, or at least stun them to the point to where I could complete the puzzle because it looked like I was almost done. I was only down to the last 2 blocks, and then very quickly I was down to the last block, and despite getting hit by the spider vampires and them being a little annoying, I do manage to shove both those blocks into the wall, but I do not get the cutscene that I was anticipating because after you do that, it's supposed to unlock something in the first room that we skipped. So I shifted into the spectral realm and I started looking at all the blocks I shoved into the wall, and it turns out the very first block that I shoved into the wall, well, it turns out that is backwards, and now I have to pull it out of the wall and readjust it with the 2 spider vampires being completely annoying to me. That's fine though. Barely have to move it around to get the way that I need it. And it does not matter if the spider vampires end up depleting some of my health because I have to go back into the spectral realm to shift through the bars anyway. I go ahead and I fix that block, I complete the puzzle, and now it's going to be time to return to the first room. Well, I guess I never went in there in the first place. And since I was never there to begin with, I would not really be returning. So let me correct myself, it is time to go to the first room. Because now that the mural puzzle is over, it unlocks a platform in that room that extends from the wall. And with that platform in place, we can jump onto it and then access a switch that we can flip. Had we have gone into that room the very first time we saw it, we would not have been able to really do anything in there because we wouldn't have been able to reach that switch. So the only thing that would have been achieved by going into that first room prior to doing the second puzzle would have been just getting harassed by even more spider vampires. So I have Raziel make his way out of that second puzzle room, and once we make it back onto the upper level walking platforms in the ventilation room, we are going to see a switch that was on the wall the entire time whenever we passed by the first time around. I did not do anything with it earlier, but now I'm going to go ahead and use it, You don't have to wait to this point, but what it's going to do is lower down a platform, and if you were to jump onto it, it's going to use the board in front of it as a locking mechanism to hold it in place against the ground. And that's exactly why we need to switch in that first room now that the platform has been extended as well. Whenever we go into that first room and navigate all the way down to the bottom and avoid all the spider vampires that are in that room, which I think there's just one to start, but even more can jump out of the webbing on the wall. But yeah, once you go in there and you jump on the platform and you pull that switch, another platform will lower and we need to return ourselves over to the ventilation room on that upper walkway area. And Raziel needs to hop onto that second platform and do the same thing, locking it in place on the ground. And with that second platform latched to the ground, it is going to open up a ventilation system on the floor below, and that is going to unlock an airflow for us to be able to use. Once that airflow begins, we can have Raziel jump down and start gliding, but rather than just continually descending, the wind will begin to carry Raziel upward. And if you let him just continue to ascend, you will eventually be taken to an upper level of the cathedral that we were unable to access prior. So I guess you could kind of consider that reaching the second half of the Silenced Cathedral. Although I definitely do not think we're quite at the halfway point yet whenever it comes to trying to reach Zephon. Like, there are a decent amount of cathedral puzzles left to go. Speaking of which, this hallway is going to be involved in the next 4 puzzles that we need to complete. There are going to be 2 connecting doors that take us to puzzle rooms where you need to continue to put blocks in walls and complete some pictures. I am going to one of those right now. But that hallway is also going to be partially involved in 2 other puzzles as well, but they are going to be time-based ones. And in both of those cases, you initiate the timer in that hallway and then you have to leave it and go somewhere else. I will cover those whenever it's time to actually be involved in trying to complete them though. For right now, let's go ahead and focus on the puzzle at hand. It is going to be another block puzzle, and I initially thought this was going to be another one where we need to push the blocks into the walls to complete a picture. I was mistaken, however. This one is a little bit different, and I'll explain why in just a moment. First, I tried to get rid of these spider vampires. I stunned one of them and I ended up impaling it with the pipe that was in the wall, and then I jumped to safety so I can devour its soul. The thing is, that soul did not want to cooperate with me, and every single time I tried to devour it, it got stuck on a wall. Now, how a soul that is not solid matter and can pass through objects somehow could not pass through that wall, I have no idea. But it just refused to do so. So I go back into the pit and I try to kill the vampires again with that pipe, and I take down one of them before I decide, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to go ahead and try and solve the puzzle and ignore the remaining vampire. Although my decision to go ahead and ignore that vampire does not last very long. It basically lasted just long enough for Raziel to knock all the blocks off of that stack so they were all individually on the ground. And at that point, as I began to assess the puzzle, and just when I was about to start moving around the blocks, the vampire hit me one more time and I said, you know what, no, we're not dealing with this again. We're going to kill this thing. I will devour its soul just so I have enough health to complete this puzzle, and we are just going to complete this puzzle without anything bothering us for the rest of the time. Okay, so that vampire is dead and it can no longer annoy Raziel. So, what makes this block puzzle different from the previous one? Well, the last one had us trying to complete a mural by pushing blocks into the wall to complete the picture. These blocks do not have any pictures on them, though. Instead, they have hexagon-shaped holes in them, and those holes pass through to other sides of the blocks. We need to identify the spaces in the walls with the hexagon shapes that align with the hexagons on the blocks. We then need to begin flipping around each block the right way, and begin pushing the blocks into the empty spaces in the wall, so the hexagon holes on the wall and the blocks will line up, and that's going to be how we solve this puzzle. I think functionally what we're doing with this is that we are lining up the holes in the blocks with those in the walls as a way of connecting pipes. That would kind of make sense considering that opening up airways is a big part of how we get around in this location. And okay, that first block took substantially longer than I really thought it was going to, but I have it in the wall lined up with the hexagon holes, and that is the only 3-sided block, so I'm going to go ahead and chalk that up as the only reason it took me as long as it did. So yeah, I kind of fumbled with it, but every other block is going to be 2-sided, so lining them up should be a lot easier. Granted, the 3-sided one was not that difficult either, but I think when I first looked at it, I thought it was a 2-sided one, or I just completely misunderstood where the third hole was, but yeah. For some reason that one took me a little while, but everything goes pretty smoothly from there. And okay, we are nearly done, and I think there's only going to be one more block puzzle that we need to solve here on the second level of the cathedral. Actually, let me rephrase that. I think there is only going to be one more block puzzle for the entire Cathedral area, because we're already done with the first level, we're on the second level, and eventually we are going to reach a third level. And of the remaining puzzles here on the second level and the third level, I can only think of one more block puzzle, and it's going to happen immediately after this. Alright, solving the puzzle caused a glass sphere to break, and inside of it was a squared weight with handles on it. The game has not told us what exactly that is for yet, but apparently we need to break all 4 of them. So I go ahead and I exit this area, and I start making my way to the very next puzzle so that we can break one more of those spheres. I shift into the material realm, and right by the door is one of the Cathedral guards. I mentioned earlier that most humans will worship Raziel because he has only been killing vampires. Although the Cathedral guards are one of the very few humans that do not care what Raziel does, they are going to try and kill him anyway. They just see him as a trespasser and a non-human, so they are going to try to impale him, throw knives at him, just whatever they can do. Fortunately, they are very easy to avoid, so I'm not going to bother with them today. And okay, I have Raziel phase into the next puzzle room where it's going to be the exact same kind of block puzzle that we just went through. It's going to be another one of those ones where there are hexagon holes in the blocks and hexagon holes in the walls. We have to line them up to solve the puzzle. And inside of this puzzle room there are going to be 2 more spider vampires. I have a bit easier of a time with these 2. The first of which I managed to kill using the Soul Reaver, but the second one manages to hit me. And of course that causes the Soul Reaver to go away because I'm no longer at full health. So I have to resort to stabbing it with a pipe and then ending it that way. I have to say, collectively for this playthrough, this is some of the worst luck I've had with these spider vampires whenever it comes to these puzzles. Granted, it's not the very worst that I have had, but it's pretty up there. But overall, I felt like it was entertaining enough to use for this playthrough. Especially in that first puzzle where the vampire was trying to attack Raziel the entire time he was dragging a block across the room, but somehow, I managed to go the entire length of the room without getting hit a single time. That may very well have been the only reason I went with this gameplay for the playthrough instead of starting over again, because it was just too funny to pass up. Because I definitely could have done better on these puzzles and gotten them done faster, but I don't know. Something about the little mistakes and not everything going according to plan kind of made this one interesting to me, so I went with this. Although while I do find it amusing seeing these things not go according to plan, that does also cause these puzzles to be solved at a pace that is a bit slower than what I would typically like. I let it go for this playthrough, but because I am going as slow as I am a little bit, which I guess I'm not going like crazy slow, it's still getting done at a reasonable pace, but still slower than optimal. Because of that, that does give these spider vampires enough time to eventually respawn, whereas ideally you would kill both of these spider vampires at the very beginning of the puzzle, and then go on to solve the puzzle fast enough so that you can get out of the room before they come back. I do not achieve that in this playthrough, so I eventually have to deal with them again. That is going to be alright though. After all, this room at least gives you weapons, and I still have the Soul Reaver as long as I do not get hit as well, so everything should go pretty smoothly. Again, not like the first puzzle where I did not realize there were spikes on the walls that I could use to kill the vampires. This time around, even if they do end up respawning, I am not going to be keeping them around. And okay, we are at the halfway point as far as getting all these blocks in place. I end up pushing the 4th block into the wall, so we're halfway there before the first spider vampire respawns. And of course he hits me and removes the Soul Reaver, but I still have the pipes I can use as a spear. And I smack the crap out of the vampire with the pipe a few times before impaling it and calling it a day. Fortunately, it did not do too much damage to me, so devouring its soul gives me the Soul Reaver back. And not long after that, the second vampire spawns into the arena as well. Only this time, I do not get hit by the vampire, I just slap the crap out of it with the Soul Reaver a few times before blowing it up. With those 2 vampires out of the way a second time, and with there only being 2 blocks left to push into the wall, I should not be having to deal with them in this room ever again. Although there are still plenty of other spider vampires all around the cathedral, so it's definitely not going to be the last time I have to deal with those vampires. And hopefully everything goes much more smoothly with those subsequent vampires than it did in here. And alright, we are down to the final block. It's all lined up. All I have to do is push it into the space in the wall, and then we are good to go, and we are going to have another glass-shattering moment. And we will also have a much needed break away from the block puzzles. And with that glass shattering moment, we are finally free of the block puzzles, at least for the foreseeable future. Gosh, I really hope I did not forget any of them. There is one other block puzzle that could be done, and that's also here on the second level, but fortunately that one is optional and I am not going to be doing it. If you were to do it, you would get a health emblem piece. Fortunately, I cover that in a separate video, so you only have to watch that if you want to. As a result, we only have to deal with 3 consecutive block puzzles in a row. We do not have to deal with a 4th one. Next up is going to be the timed puzzles. You just saw me smack a big bell with the Soul Reaver and then hop through a window and glide across the ventilation hole, and now I am running down this corridor to smack the other bell. If you are quick enough in doing this and you hit both bells, the simultaneous ringing will hit a pitch that will be loud enough or just precise enough to break the large glass window that was connected to the hallway where we hit the very first bell. It is going to be very important to have that removed for the very next timed puzzle. So for the next timed puzzle, we need to go ahead and have this block over here in the side of the hallway with the hieroglyphics on it moved out of the way. And in order to do that, there is going to be a lever back in the hallway where we smack that first bell. Whenever we pull that lever, the hieroglyphic block will move out of the way, revealing a new path. But it will only remain open for a very brief amount of time. Simply pulling the lever and then running to the block, you're going to run out of that time. So what you need to do is shift into the spectral realm immediately after pulling the lever, and in that dimension, time does not move the same way. So you basically have unlimited time to leisurely walk your way over to the hieroglyphic block, and then we're going to be free to explore the rest of level 2 of the Cathedral. We're going to be going into a tower-like room where pipes kind of circulate around the room and continue to ascend. Because of that, we can walk on the pipes, and then we can use those kind of like a staircase to reach the top of the tower and enter a new area. And now I realize, phrasing it like level 1 and level 2, I might need to be a little bit more specific than that, because I would still consider myself on level 2 of the Cathedral, even though I just climbed some stairway-like pipes. So what do I mean by level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4 here? Well, anytime I use an updraft from the ventilation system or some pipes to access a previously unattainable location, I consider that a new level. So we started off on level 1, we opened up the vents, we got a draft going, and then Raziel could use the updraft to reach the next portion of the Cathedral, which I would consider level 2. The draft is the distinguishing part of what I consider levels in the Cathedral. So by that phrasing, we're eventually going to open up another vent and create another updraft, and that's going to take us to level 3. And on level 3, there are going to be some pipes that we can get the airflow running through again, and then we can use that updraft to reach the final level. So yeah, whenever you hear me saying level 1, 2, 3, whatever, that is what I mean by that. And okay, you saw me phase through some bars on the wall, and then reach a room where I opened up some lids with some whistling air escaping the pipes. Specifically in the room with the humans, I lift up the 2 lids closest to the screen, and then the whistling gets loud enough for another one of the glass spheres to break, which we finally figured out where that location was. It's right by the bars that I had to phase through. That just leaves one more sphere to go, and I go back to the bars that I phased through, and I go the opposite direction this time to another room with a bunch of lids, but this time it's being guarded by spider vampires. And in this room, Raziel needs to lift the 2 lids that are furthest away from the screen. Doing that allows the whistling wind to hit the pitch it needs to break the very last sphere. If at any point you accidentally lift the wrong lid, don't worry, you can close it, and then you can just adjust and open the ones you need to open. And after a sphere is broken, it no longer matters. You can open up any of the lids that you want. It does not change anything. For example, back in the room with the humans, after the glass sphere was already broken, I opened up the 3rd hatch, but I really did not need to. I just kind of did it for the hell of it. And yeah, it really did not matter because the sphere was already broken, so I could have all of them open, I could have all of them closed, I could do really whatever I wanted. The job was already done at that point. And okay, we are back in the material world, and it's finally time to use those weird weights with the handles that we have been looking at every single time a glass sphere broke, but we did not really know what they were for. And as far as I can tell, those square weights kind of act like magnetic locks. Whenever you interact with them, Raziel will put both his hands on the handles, struggle to pick up those weights, and then rotate them to his left. And it seems like every single time he rotates them to the left and drops them, it is unlocking something, because whenever all of them are rotated, it opens up the ventilation system, and then suddenly we have another updraft. And then Raziel can ride that with his wings all the way up to the 3rd level of the Cathedral. Once Raziel reaches the 3rd level, the first thing you are going to notice is a pipework system, where segments of the pipe are vertical and need to be pushed into place, that way it completes the entire run of pipes. That is going to be the very first thing that we need to do, because whenever it comes to setting up the next airflow that comes out of a combination of 3 pipes later, and we're going to be using that airflow to reach the final level of the Cathedral, if you do not shove these pipes in place, that airflow is not going to be strong enough for you to reach the final level. And okay, here's the room with the 3 pipes I was referencing earlier that are going to be creating the updraft Raziel needs to reach the 4th level. Only there's no wind coming through those pipes just yet, and we need to fix that. So we need to open up a new pathway to allow us to reach the other parts of the 3rd level. To do so, Raziel is going to be rotating some more magnetic locks, and rotating those is going to be moving these massive blocks out of the way, revealing another path. So I go ahead and I have Raziel climb on top of the 3 pipes we'll be using later on, and from there he should be able to glide all the way to that new path that we opened up. Beyond there, we just need to go into the spectral realm. I look around for any souls I can devour just so I can quickly replenish my health, although there are none to be found. I guess the Slua beat me to it. Realizing that, I go ahead and I have Raziel pass through the bars to the next room, and in here is a really interesting mechanic that's not really going to be used a whole lot, and it's not going to be used in this playthrough either. But earlier in the game, Raziel referenced that the people of the Cathedral figured out that there was a hymn that played at a very specific pitch that was just high enough or just right, whatever, that whenever it is heard by vampires, it kills them. And whenever you get done connecting all the pipes, and I believe once Raziel has the next ability after defeating Zephon, you can return to this room just beyond the bars that we passed through initially, and at the very top of those pipes are going to be some hatches you can open up, and those pipes will release the hymn that he was referencing, and you can kill the vampires in this area using that. It really doesn't come up ever again, so it's kind of a one and done kind of mechanic, but I find it pretty neat, and it's also mention worthy now that Raziel is more of a wraith than a vampire. The hymn has no effect on him. And while I am kind of completely screwing up this fight against these spiders and trying to decide whether or not I want to ignore them and move the block, or if I even can do that with them attacking me, I should probably mention what the main objective is going to be from this point forward. So in this area of the 3rd level, we need to find 3 different circular handles that we can rotate. By rotating those handles, they open up an airflow that's going to be going through the pipe network. And we need all 3 of them opened up so that conversion point where we saw the 3 pipes together earlier, whenever it is releasing air, the airflow will be strong enough for Raziel to use it to glide all the way up to the 4th level. And okay, I stalled long enough for Raziel to kill one of the vampires, now the other one is, I guess, just going to hang out up there now. Okay, whatever, I'll take it. So at this point I need to have Raziel go back to the stone block that he moved earlier, causing all the rubble to collapse. And we need to move it back over to that large pipe where we had to jump onto it earlier to get the more spear-like pipe to use as a weapon. With that block directly beside the pipe, we can jump onto it and we'll be able to access the first of those round handles. Technically there was one that we could get prior to now, but I'd rather get the last 2 first, and then get what would have been the first round handle on the way out. I mean, it really does not matter if you get that one first or if you save it for last, because we are going to be taking the exact same path back anyway. So go in whatever order you want, you're going to be running by these things a couple of times anyway. And okay, I do not have any souls around me to devour, and I need to get my health back to full. So while I backtrack to the Slua to devour their souls, I guess I can go ahead and explain what's happening here. Kind of similar to what we saw whenever we first reached the 3rd level. There is a network of pipes where segments have been removed, but they are still right by where they need to be, only they're lifted up vertically. So Raziel needs to enter the material realm again, and then begin climbing that network of pipes, knocking them over and putting them in place. We are going to need all of them attached again. Also, at the very top of that pipe network is going to be another round handle that Raziel needs to turn. That will get the airflow going again, and now that the pipes are all connected once more, that airflow is going to reach the conversion point, and we will only have one handle to go. Then we should be able to glide our way to the next boss battle. But yeah, going after this second handle, you are going to notice that there are going to be spider vampires in the material realm that kind of want to get in your way, but do a very bad job of it. As annoying as these spider vampires can be if you're all on the same level, they do not do the greatest job of jumping on the wall and climbing after you. Kind of like what we saw earlier, even if they do manage to jump onto a wall thinking that they will pursue you, a lot of the times they will just hang out up there and not bother you at all. So as long as we keep Raziel climbing, these spider vampires are really not going to be too mention worthy. And okay, that's 2 handles down and airflow returned to 2 out of the 3 pipes. We only have 1 round handle to go, so time to start backtracking through the 3rd level. In order to backtrack, Raziel is going to reach that pit where he removed the block and caused that rubble to collapse, and that was the same block we ended up using to access the first handle that I turned. Yeah, inside that pit, we need to move the block one more time. So there are 2 sides of the pit, one side has rubble and the other side does not. We want to go ahead and move that block to the side that has no rubble, that way we can jump on top of it, and we can use that block as a means of reaching the pathway above and use it as a way to escape. Also, I have to point this out because my luck with these spider vampires has been absolutely terrible the entire time I have been inside the Silenced Cathedral, but back here inside the pit, I took them out with absolute ease, not getting hit a single time, so yay. Like I mentioned earlier, that organ-like room with all the vertical pipes that we saw whenever we first passed through the first set of bars here on the 3rd level, that is where the last handle is going to be. So what we will need to do is shift back into the spectral realm, path through those bars, find a rift on the other side of those bars in that organ room, shift back into the material realm and grab that last handle really quickly and start getting out of there as fast as possible so we can go ahead and fight Zephon. And after that last cutscene, you saw it, the air is now flowing perfectly through all 3 of those segments of the conversion pipe, and I am heading all the way back to that point now. It's basically just 1 room away. So a quick shift back into the spectral realm, passing through the bars, heading back to that room, shifting back to the material realm, and trying my best not to get hit by a spider vampire ready to ambush me. I go ahead and I start climbing up those platforms, and yeah, we're going to go ahead and use that pipe, glide all the way up to the final level of the Silenced Cathedral, and at that point we are going to be free to face off against Zephon. I believe this is the boss that requires the most amount of time to reach him in the entire game. You could argue the very last boss of the game takes a little bit longer, but I actually think it's this one. I guess the final boss of the game has more cutscenes that you have to watch before you reach him, and even then the cutscene just before you fight him is very lengthy as well. So maybe if you add up all the cutscene time on top of the gameplay time, the final boss is in fact longer. But I think if you remove the cutscenes like if you were skipping them, it is a very close race, or this area may actually be longer. Regardless if it is actually longer or shorter, the Silenced Cathedral still feels longer, and I'd much rather be solving the puzzles at the very end of the game than I would be solving the puzzles inside of here. At least it felt like the puzzles were a little bit more varied in the final dungeon. Anyway, enough about that rant. I went ahead and I activated the warp gate for this area. I do not anticipate needing to use it, but after I got soft locked inside of Melchiah's territory, I'm not taking anything for granted here. I want as many fast travel options as possible just in case something weird happens. Anyway, enough build up, let's go ahead and say hello to Raziel's brother Zephon.
Son, there is no returning for you, Raziel.
Zephon, your visage becomes you. It's an appropriate reflection of your soul.
And you are not his handsome Raziel anymore. His precious firstborn son turned betrayer.
You have missed so many changes, little Raziel. Look around you. See how the human's weapon of destruction has become my home. Indeed, my body. A cocoon of brick and granite from which to watch a pupating world.
A crevice in which to cower, only scuttling from the shadows to devour a victim already ensnared in your cowardly trap. But you've made the mistake of leaving me unbound, and it is you who must succumb to my will.
Will, instinct, reflex action. The insect mind finds little difference. I warn you, brother. As my stature has grown, so it is matched by my appetite. Step forward, morsel.
So we get to see the modern day version of Zephon, which, similar to his spider vampire children, has become very bug-like himself. So whenever it comes to defeating Zephon, we need to get him to stab one of his legs into the ground. Whenever he does that, Raziel will have the opportunity to strike it. If Raziel has the Soul Reaver, it will destroy the leg in one hit. If Raziel only has his claws, it's going to take 2 hits. Either way, once a leg is destroyed, Zephon will scream out in pain, and he's also going to produce an egg. Raziel is going to need to grab the egg, and then get out of there really quickly before Zephon has the opportunity to attack him. And while Raziel is carrying around the egg, he needs to go all the way to the back of the room. This is where we get to find the body of a vampire hunter who was very lucky to make it this far, but also very unlucky because, well, he never really stood a chance against Zephon. Fortunately for us though, his flamethrower is not damaged and still functional. So we use the flamethrower to catch the egg on fire, and that gives Raziel a burning projectile to throw at Zephon. This is the only way to do meaningful damage against the boss, and it is going to take throwing 3 flaming eggs back at Zephon to beat him. And even though you only need to destroy 3 legs, there is an achievement for destroying all 4, which I got here today.
Zephon's apostate soul has bestowed on you a new gift. Like his vampire spawn, you are able to scale certain walls which are otherwise impassable, but only in the physical realm. In the spirit world, these insubstantial edifices will not support you.
Okay, that is useful information, but the Elder God is actually not done talking to us. He has one more thing to say. I'm not sure why he didn't just say it at the end of that cutscene, but instead he wants us to walk like 10 more feet, then he'll talk to us again.
In the mountains beyond the pillars, Nosgoth's cataclysms have exposed an ancient crime. Endowed with Zephon's soul, you may now progress where your path was hitherto impeded.
And okay, this seems like a pretty good stopping point for the time being. What I will end up doing is saving outside of Zephon's chamber, exiting the game, and then reloading the game so I end up back in the Elder God's chamber instead. And that is where we will begin the very next part of this playthrough. But yeah, so far 2 brothers who betrayed us are now deceased, and we continue to get Raziel new abilities. Melchiah gave us the ability to pass through insubstantial barriers in the spectral realm, and now Zephon has given us the ability to climb things in the material realm. Using those 2 abilities together is going to allow us to face off against a new sub-boss and a new main boss in the very next episode. Which means I am going to have a lot to knock out in part 3, and even though I do have a lot, it really should not take too long. Like I mentioned earlier, Zephon's area of the game is one of the largest ones, and besides maybe the final area of the game, it is definitely the longest. And in comparison, the very next area I need to go to in order to access the 3rd boss, Rahab, is going to be way, way smaller. Even if you combine it with the area for the sub-boss, it's still substantially shorter. Which means things in this playthrough should start speeding up substantially from here. Anyway, I think I've said enough to close out the episode. Just know in part 3, we are going after Rahab. For anyone who has stuck around this long, thank you for watching the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to try and keep these coming out weekly, so hopefully next week we will have part 3 up and running. And besides Soul Reaver, I played through other games like the remakes of Resident Evil 1 and 2. I also played through the remaster of Crash Bandicoot, and I played through a bunch of different Mortal Kombat games. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, feel free to check it out. With all of that out of the way though, thank you again for watching the video, take care, and hopefully I see you next time.